You know, we spend literally billions of dollars globally every single year trying to eradicate one specific creature. I mean, it has absolutely zero economic value. It is globally despised. It's universally considered like the ultimate nuisance. So if you were listening to this right now, I want you to ask yourself a deeply uncomfortable question. Why would one of the most profound, majestic declarations of absolute divine power in the history of human existence use this exact irritating insect to prove its ultimate point?
Welcome to Insights. I'm Adam Rivers.
And I'm Sarah Collins. In this episode, we'll reflect carefully on the Qur'an, verse by verse, focusing on wording, context, and coherence. And as always, this show is about unpacking the profound, multi-layered dimensions of the revelation to entirely reconstruct how we view the world around us. So, in our last episode, we explored the stunning imagery of the eternal gardens promised to the believers, right? And how the fruits they receive will feel familiar, yet entirely new.
Right, yeah.
We talked about how that challenges us to see the eternal hiding within the everyday. Today, however, we face a very different kind of challenge.
We certainly do. And it centers around a specific, highly disruptive verse. I'm going to read the English translation of the 26th verse of the second chapter, Al-Baqarah. It reads, "Indeed, Allah is not timid to present an example, that of a mosquito or what is smaller than it. And those who have believed know that it is the truth from their Lord. But as for those who disbelieve, they say, what did Allah intend by this as an example?
Yeah.
He misleads many thereby and guides many thereby. And he misleads not, except the defiantly disobedient."
Wow.
So right out of the gate, we have to grapple with the core paradox you just mentioned. Why would the ultimate majesty of the Creator be tied to something as tiny and frankly as irritating as a mosquito?
It really is a jarring image when you first encounter it. I mean, we're talking about the ultimate reality of the universe, and suddenly we are zeroing in on a bug. Honestly, before we even dissect the biology of the insect itself, how are we supposed to prepare our minds to even process this? Because my immediate instinct, and I think the instinct of anyone listening, is to feel a bit of cognitive whiplash.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like we are completely lacking the proper framework to understand this.
Well, let me put it this way for you.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening who feels that exact same whiplash. Have you ever tried to learn a completely new language but failed miserably because you kept forcing its words into the strict grammar rules of your own mother tongue?
Oh, I have actually done exactly that. I tried learning German a few years ago, and I kept trying to arrange the sentence structure exactly like English.
And how did that go?
It was a disaster. I ended up speaking this completely broken, incomprehensible hybrid. You cannot just swap the words. You literally have to, like, rewire how your brain sequences thought.
Right, and that rewiring process is precisely what reflecting on the revelation requires. It demands that we completely abandon all of our preconceived human metrics. We have to discard the inherited intellectual molds that society has drilled into us since childhood.
So we have to unlearn to learn.
Exactly. You see, the Quran does not just offer us a neat, comforting list of data points to memorize. Its goal is far more radical and far more surgical. It seeks to completely dismantle the existing infrastructure of the human mind.
Wait, dismantle it completely, like from absolute zero. That sounds almost dangerous. I mean, we rely on our societal rules and structures to make sense of the world. Why does the revelation need to tear all of that down just to make a point about a mosquito?
Because the infrastructure we currently rely on is fundamentally warped. Our minds are burdened by heavy social accumulations. We are weighed down by blind habits and traditions that have been entirely emptied of their actual meaning over centuries. Think about how we evaluate worth.
Okay, yeah.
The revelation wants to clear out that corrupted, superficial foundation and rebuild human consciousness from scratch, using pure truth and rational proof. So, dropping a mosquito into a discussion of ultimate divine majesty is not just some random stylistic choice.
Right, it's deliberate.
Very deliberate. It is an intentional, calculated cognitive shock. It is a targeted strike designed specifically for minds that are comfortably trapped in the prison of superficial appearances.
I am trying to visualize this prison of superficial appearances you were talking about. Are you saying that our everyday metrics, you know, how we measure success, power, or importance, are actually blocking us from understanding the revelation?
Yes, exactly that.
Because if you look at modern society, we measure greatness almost exclusively by volume and scale. We care about how much capital a corporation raised, how massive a skyscraper is, or how many millions of followers someone has. We are obsessed with the gigantic.
Exactly. Exactly. You just identified the exact grammar of the broken language we are speaking. We measure the infinite with a ruler designed to measure social status. We have built these massive mental fortresses out of what society tells us is valuable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But the revelation completely ignores our human metrics of what is grand or worthy. It refuses to validate our obsession with scale. When it bypasses the galaxies and the mountains to focus on a mosquito, it forces you to stop and realize that your tape measure is entirely broken.
It is basically taking a sledgehammer to our ego. Okay, with that in mind, I want to gently shift our focus to the specific and honestly surprising phrasing used right at the beginning of the verse. It says the Creator is not timid or not shy to present this example.
Right.
I have to admit, I find that language a bit confusing. Why does the revelation use a deeply human emotion, like timidity or shyness, to describe a divine action?
Well, to understand that, we need to look at the psychology of power as human beings understand it. Let me ask you this. If you were an immensely powerful king addressing a vast, wealthy empire from your grand balcony, would you ever point down and boast about a single speck of dust on the marble floor?
I would absolutely not. If I am a king, I am talking about my massive armies, the gold reserves of my treasury, the borders I just conquered. If I stood up there and started talking about dust, my subjects would think I had lost my mind.
They'd probably overthrow you.
Seriously. It would make me look weak, or at the very least, completely distracted from what actually matters.
And that gets right to the heart of the linguistic root used here in the Arabic. The word translated as timid or shy comes from the Arabic root representing life, haya. In human terms, shyness or shame often indicates a living, feeling heart. It is a contraction of the soul that prevents a person from doing something disgraceful.
Okay, I follow you.
But look at how humans operate in sick, appearance-driven societies. People are literally ashamed to mention small, everyday, or physically minute things in grand gatherings.
Because it damages their brand, so to speak.
Precisely. They fear that talking about something insignificant will damage their artificial prestige. Kings, CEOs, and powerful leaders in our inherited human traditions only talk about massive, imposing things. Armies, corporate mergers, wealth, destructive weapons.
Right, the flashy stuff.
Exactly. To them, mentioning a tiny insect like a mosquito in a state address would completely shatter their manufactured aura of absolute dominance. They suffer from a fragile ego that directly equates personal dignity with the sheer physical bulk of what they discuss. And so, mentioning a tiny...
Wait, so the revelation is deliberately using this phrasing to expose that human societies literally equate dignity with physical bulk and ignore the small out of pure, fragile ego.
Yes, that is exactly what is happening. The Creator is entirely shattering the psychological idol that humanity worships. By explicitly stating that there is no timidity, no hesitation, and no shame in using a mosquito as an example, the revelation is declaring that divine greatness does not operate on these childish, superficial human metrics. God does not need a flashy show of massive objects to prove sovereignty.
That exposes how deeply insecure we actually are as a species. We need to build massive, towering monuments just to feel important, because underneath it all, we're actually quite weak and vulnerable. We overcompensate with size.
We really do.
But absolute power does not need to overcompensate. There is no insecurity, no fragile ego for the Creator to protect.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. True, absolute perfection is not about physical size. It is about the infinite precision of creation. The revelation refuses to flatter our limited minds or play along with our social traditions that turn their noses up at the microscopic.
It's confronting us directly.
Very directly. It invades the fortresses of human pride to show us our absolute helplessness in the face of the smallest imaginable creature. It is an expression of absolute, quiet confidence in the perfection of design, regardless of the physical dimensions of the canvas.
So, if the revelation is invading our mental fortresses, how exactly does it deliver this truth to the human mind? Because abstract theological truth is notoriously hard for us to grasp.
It really is.
It is like trying to understand advanced theoretical physics without any physical models, diagrams, or equations to look at. The human brain just sort of short circuits. How does this verse bridge that gap between the infinite and our limited comprehension?
Let us run a thought experiment. Imagine you are trapped in a burning building. You run down a hallway and hit a heavy, solid oak door that is dead-bolted shut. What happens when you strike that locked door? Do you just tap it politely with your knuckles?
Of course not. If my life is on the line, I am hitting it with everything I have. I'm kicking it, throwing my shoulder into it repeatedly, trying to force it open or break the lock entirely so I can escape.
Right. Keep that exact physical intensity in mind. That impact is embedded deeply in the Arabic word used here for present or strike, an example, yadrib. It does not just mean to casually mention a metaphor or narrate a polite story.
Oh, interesting.
The root of the word carries the deep, resonant meaning of physically striking, of hitting one thing against another with enough force to leave a permanent mark. When the revelation strikes an example, it is physically and intellectually knocking heavily on the closed doors of our minds.
So it's an active, forceful intervention. It is not passive reading.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It is trying to aggressively wake up hearts that have become calcified and hardened by years of inherited rituals and unthinking habits. See, in the Qur'an, parables are never just pretty rhetorical devices or decorative poetry meant to sound nice.
They aren't just literary ornaments.
No, not at all. They are sharp, highly calibrated cognitive tools. They take vast, abstract realities and force them into tangible sensory images so our limited human brains can actually hold on to them, examine them, and be transformed by them.
I love that image of the parable as a cognitive tool, like a mental crowbar. It is not a bedtime story. It is an instrument actively trying to pry open a mind that society has sealed shut. But the verse also includes a very interesting phrase here. It says to strike an example of whatever it may be. That seems incredibly broad. Why leave it so open-ended?
Well, that open-endedness is highly deliberate. It means the entirety of existence, from the most terrifying giant galaxies to the most invisible microbes, is an open book. The entire universe is a massive quarry of raw material used to forge these examples.
Wow, literally everything is on the table.
Everything. It ensures that humanity can never get comfortable. You cannot box the divine into only speaking through majestic mountains or roaring oceans. This strike could come from anywhere. And the purpose is always twofold: to guide those who are genuinely searching and to completely expose the arrogant.
Which brings us right to the creature itself. Out of that massive, open-ended universe of possibilities, the example lands on mosquito. As we mentioned at the start, this is arguably the most universally despised creature on the planet. Why choose the ultimate nuisance? I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but surely a soaring eagle or a powerful lion would make a better point about divine majesty.
Let me push back on that by asking you to look at our relationship with nature. What is the one creature on Earth that has absolutely zero economic value, inspires no awe or majesty like an eagle, generates no fear like a bear, and is routinely swatted away, crushed, and discarded without a single second thought by every human being on the planet?
The mosquito. We literally do not even register it as a life form most of the time. When it lands on our arm, we do not marvel at its biology. We just reflexively destroy it. It has zero prestige. It is the definition of insignificant.
Exactly, and the linguistic root of the Arabic word for mosquito, buada, perfectly captures that reality. It literally translates to a part of a whole or a tiny fraction. The word itself signals extreme triviality. In human consciousness, the mosquito represents the absolute peak of insignificance and weakness.
Yeah, that makes sense.
However, when you look past the human bias and examine it biologically, the reality is entirely different and, frankly, terrifyingly complex.
Okay, I know a little bit about them because they constantly bite me in the summer, but how complex can they really be? They seem pretty simple, you know? They fly, they bite, they leave.
That is the illusion of scale. This microscopic creature possesses highly advanced thermal sensors that allow it to detect the heat signature of a host from an impressive distance, even in pitch darkness. It does not just bite. It is equipped with an array of 6 precision microscopic needles designed to saw through skin tissue without triggering human pain receptors immediately. And while it does that,
Hold on, are you saying all that incredible microscopic technology is packed into a creature we consider entirely worthless while we think we're gods for building dead stone skyscrapers?
yes, with absolute certainty. And there's more. While it is sawing through your skin, it manufactures and injects highly complex blood-thinning chemicals to prevent your blood from clotting while it extracts it. Furthermore, it operates an incredibly complex flight maneuverability system that allows it to dodge raindrops midair and navigate in the tightest possible spaces.
That is insane.
Right. That is the massive, humbling contrast the revelation is drawing. Human beings swell with immense pride over structures made of dead, lifeless materials. We stack stones, pour concrete, erect steel girders, wire them with electricity, and then we stand back and declare ourselves masters of the universe.
But those buildings are entirely dead. They do not grow, they do not heal, they do not reproduce. They're just accumulated
And
mass.
vicely, they are deaf, dumb, and blind. Contrast that dead mass with the living, pulsating, hyper-complex divine creation found inside the mosquito. It holds the profound secret of life itself, a secret that leaves every human scientist entirely baffled and helpless.
We can't replicate life.
Not at all. Striking an example with a mosquito is a direct, unavoidable call to abandon our superficial evaluations. It demands that we stop worshiping large, empty, lifeless things and stop despising the small, brilliant, infinitely complex things.
That completely flips the script on what power actually is. We think power is brute force or massive scale, but true power is packing a thermal imaging drone with chemical synthesizers and a multi-tool drilling rig into a body the size of a pinhead and then giving it the spark of life.
Exactly.
It makes our biggest achievements look incredibly clumsy. I mean, we build a massive commercial airplane, and it takes a concrete runway miles long just to take off. But a mosquito can land on a single human hair, extract nutrients, and fly away backward in a fraction of a second. The level of engineering is beyond comprehension, yet we just blindly swat it.
It reveals the tragic irony of human perception. We are literally crushing technological and biological marvels between our palms every day while applauding ourselves for building a slightly taller concrete box in our city centers.
That is an incredibly humbling visual. But the verse does not just stop at the mosquito itself. It adds this fascinating, slightly mysterious phrase, or what is smaller than it, or depending on the linguistic angle, what is above it. How do we unpack that extension? It feels like the scope suddenly shifts rapidly.
To grasp that shift, think about the history of science. What happens when you look through a powerful microscope at a single, seemingly clear drop of pond water? Does the world end at the boundary of that water drop, or does an entirely new, terrifyingly vast world suddenly begin?
A whole new universe opens up. You see things swimming around, complex cellular structures, bacteria, an entire ecosystem thriving in a space that was completely invisible to the naked eye just a moment before.
Precisely. And that is the absolute genius of the Arabic phrase, fama faqwa. It carries a dual meaning that perfectly aligns with the boundless nature of the revelation. On one hand, it can mean what is literally above it in physical size, meaning slightly larger creatures.
Okay, like what?
And indeed, the Qur'an strikes parables using larger, yet still despised, creatures like flies and spiders in other chapters, explicitly challenging humanity to come together to create even a single fly. But the second meaning is where it becomes a breathtaking cognitive challenge. It means what is above it or beyond it in its specific quality of minuteness.
Wait, meaning what is even smaller than a mosquito, even more hidden?
Exactly. We are talking about microbes, viruses, cellular structures, DNA sequencing, quantum realms, microscopic entities that the human mind could not even conceive of when the Quran was first revealed 14 centuries ago. By adding this specific phrase, the revelation essentially throws open a door that will never ever close.
That gives me chills. It is basically future-proofing the revelation for all of human history. It is saying to the ancient listener, you think the mosquito is small, just wait. And it is saying to the modern listener, you think the virus is small, just wait until you discover the atom. The examples will never run out.
It completely shatters the skeptical argument that this is just an ancient text limited by the rudimentary scientific knowledge of its time. It is actively inviting humanity to look deeper, to build the microscopes, to construct the particle accelerators, to keep searching.
Because there's always more.
Yes, because it promises that the divine signature is etched all the way down to the subatomic level. It is an eternal invitation to scientific and spiritual discovery. The universe in all its microscopic glory remains a permanent classroom.
Which brings us perfectly to the students sitting in that classroom. The verse immediately pivots to how humans react to this exact cognitive test. It is like a professor handing out the exact same incredibly difficult exam to two different students. They are looking at the same paper, reading the same words about the mosquito, but their internal reactions are completely opposed. How does the revelation describe the psychology of the first student, the believer?
Let us examine the root of belief itself. If you, as a modern person, are facing a massive unknown in your life, like a career change or a health crisis, does true, deep psychological security come from forcefully ignoring the unknown and pretending it does not exist? Or does it come from leaning into the unknown, facing it, and trusting the process of discovery.
Well, if you just ignore the unknown, you are constantly living in a state of background terror that it will eventually catch up with you. It is a very fragile, anxious way to live. True security only comes from facing it, analyzing it, and integrating it into your understanding.
And that psychological reality is embedded in the very root of the Arabic word for belief used here, amana. In its purest linguistic form, it means security, tranquility, and safety. This is a crucial paradigm shift.
Okay, how so?
The Quranic concept of belief is not about mindless, empty ritualism. It is not about blindly inheriting a set of cultural traditions from your parents and stubbornly defending them against outsiders. True belief is a state of deep psychological stability and mental clarity.
So, belief is not just agreeing with a list of facts. It is an actual state of being.
Correct. That stability is exactly what allows a person to comfortably receive new, shocking, or counterintuitive truths without their ego instantly rejecting them. And the verse highlights a crucial, often misunderstood sequence regarding this state of being. It says the believers know it is the truth. It does not say they blindly assume it or that they just passively accept it because they were told to. Belief actively generates knowledge.
How does that work in practice? How does feeling secure lead to knowledge about a mosquito?
Because the believer's mind is secure and free from the constant, exhausting anxiety of protecting a fragile social ego, they do not feel insulted by the mosquito. They can see right past the superficial shell of the insect. They immediately recognize the profound biological wisdom and the philosophical truth underneath.
They aren't threatened by it.
Exactly. Furthermore, the verse says they know it is from their Lord, utilizing the specific Arabic word, rab.
I'm glad you brought that word up because I always hear rab translated simply as Lord or Master, which honestly sounds very authoritative, distant, and a bit archaic. It sounds like a feudal king.
That is a severely limited translation that misses the intimacy of the concept. The root of rab intimately means the educator, the nurturer, the one who fosters growth stage by stage, much like a gardener tending to a delicate plant. The believer realizes that God is actively educating their mind through this tiny insect.
Oh, that's beautiful.
The Creator is training them in intellectual humility, meticulously breaking them free from the fake size-obsessed metrics of society. They see the mosquito not as an insult to divine majesty, but as a customized, highly specific lesson from their ultimate teacher.
I absolutely love the idea that belief is a state of security that allows for genuine curiosity. If you are insecure, you are constantly defensive. If someone challenges your worldview, you lash out. But if you have that amana, that deep internal tranquility, you can look at the mosquito or any strange, challenging reality in life and say, okay, what is the lesson here? What am I being taught? You don't feel threatened by the unconventional packaging of the truth. You trust the educator.
Exactly. The believer is an active, willing participant in their own intellectual and spiritual evolution. They are constantly looking for the curriculum hidden in the fabric of everyday reality.
But unfortunately, we have the second student in the classroom. The verse presents a sharply contrasting reaction from the other camp. They look at the exact same mosquito, the exact same biological marvel, and have a radically different response. What is happening in their minds? Why do they fail the test so spectacularly?
Imagine you are standing outside at noon on a cloudless day. The sun is blazing. If you tightly cover your eyes with both of your hands, does the sun actually stop shining? Or have you just made yourself entirely blind to the reality around you?
Well, the sun is obviously still there, blasting heat and light. I haven't changed the universe at all. I have just isolated myself in the dark. It is a completely self-inflicted blindness.
That physical action is the precise linguistic reality of the word for disbelief, kufr. At its ancient agricultural root, it means to cover, to conceal, or to hide something. A farmer who covers a seed with dirt in a field is technically performing an act of kufr in the strict linguistic sense of the word. But when this term is elevated to describe human psychology, it describes individuals who intentionally cover their own intellect with a thick, suffocating fog of arrogance.
So they are not just passively ignorant, they are actively burying the truth.
Exactly. They bury their natural intuition under a massive mountain of social traditions, pride, and earthly desires. So when they are presented with the profound example of the mosquito, they do not reflect. They do not pause to consider the biological marvel, the thermal sensors, the complex flight dynamics, or the philosophical lesson about scale.
They just reject it.
Yes. Instead, their immediate knee-jerk reaction is a mocking, dismissive question. They say, what did God intend by this as an example?
It is almost like they are deeply offended, like they are saying, how dare the divine speak to us using a bug? We are important. We are executives. We are kings. We deal in gold and armies. Give us a parable worthy of our high status.
That is precisely the tone. They are suffering from what we might call severe cognitive colorblindness. They are attempting to judge the boundless, infinite wisdom of the revelation using their heavily corrupted, earthbound standards of luxury and royal prestige.
It's pure ego.
It is pure intellectual entitlement. They are demanding that the Creator conform to their limited, flashy tastes. They reject the very principle of deep, reflective thinking. If the packaging of the thought does not immediately flatter their self-image, it is a deliberate shutting down of the mind.
That exposes such a dangerous trap that I think many of us fall into without realizing it. We often think of disbelief as just a lack of information. We think, oh, that person just hasn't read the right book, or they don't have all the scientific facts yet. But this suggests that disbelief is actually a very active, arrogant defense mechanism. It is a stubborn refusal to engage with anything that challenges your established hierarchy of what is important. If truth comes in humble clothing, like a mosquito, they will mock it rather than learn from it.
It is the ultimate tragedy of the closed mind. They are so obsessed with the glamorous wrapping paper that they literally throw away the priceless gift hidden inside, and then they have the audacity to mock the giver for using cheap paper.
That brings us to a part of the verse that I know makes a lot of people deeply uncomfortable when they read it. It says about this parable, "He misleads many thereby and guides many thereby." I have to admit, it almost sounds at first glance like a trap is being set by the Creator. Why would a parable meant to teach actually result in actively misleading people? It feels contradictory.
It only feels contradictory if we misunderstand the mechanics of how truth operates in the world. Let me give you an ecological analogy. Does pure, life-giving rain falling from the sky make a conscious, discriminatory choice to grow a beautiful, nourishing fruit tree in one patch of dirt and a toxic, poisonous weed in another patch right next to it?
No, the rain is completely neutral. It is just water falling from the clouds. It just activates whatever seeds are already sitting in the dirt. If the soil is rich and planted with apple seeds, you get apples. If the soil is toxic and completely choked with weed seeds, the rain is just going to make those weeds grow faster, stronger, and more destructive.
That is the exact cosmic principle at play here. The revelation, the parable of the mosquito, is the pure, life-giving rain. The phrase, "he misleads many," is not some unjust, arbitrary initial act of deception by the Creator. God is not tricking anyone. It is the natural, inevitable operation of a cosmic law regarding the human heart.
I see.
When a person has actively chosen a life of arrogance, when they have spent years filling their mental soil with the toxic seeds of pride, superficiality, and entitlement, the introduction of pure truth acts as a powerful catalyst.
So the truth forces their hidden toxicity to the surface.
Yes, it forces their internal disease into the light. By choosing to mock the mosquito, they actively push themselves further into the dark. The parable becomes the instrument of their misguidance only because of their own freely chosen, arrogant reaction to it. The rain watered their weeds.
That makes perfect sense.
Conversely, the root word for guidance involves direction and gentle leading. Those who are humble, who have done the hard work of preparing good mental soil, find that the exact same rain, the exact same parable, illuminates their path and directs them forward.
That dynamic so intensely highlights the reality of human free will and ultimate personal responsibility. We love to blame our circumstances or our confusion on external factors, but the verse does not force anyone's reaction. It merely exposes what is already hidden inside them. So the mosquito is basically a psychological mirror. It doesn't put the arrogance into the person. It just reflects the arrogance that was already festering there.
Right.
If you are deeply insecure and obsessed with status, the mosquito triggers that insecurity. You mock it to protect your ego, and you walk further away from the truth. If you are humble, the mosquito triggers genuine awe, and you walk closer to the truth. You cannot blame the mirror for the ugly reflection it shows you.
A perfect analogy. The revelation simply accelerates the trajectory you have already chosen for yourself. It brings your internal reality to its logical conclusion.
Okay, so that leads us perfectly into the final categorization in the verse. It specifically names the exact type of person who falls into this trap of being misled by their own reflection. It says, "And he misleads not except the defiantly disobedient," and the specific Arabic term used is fesiken. Who exactly are these people? How did they get to this severe point of distortion?
To understand the fesiken, we have to return to the agricultural roots of the Arabic language, which are incredibly vivid. What happens to a piece of fruit, like a date growing on a palm tree in the intense desert heat, when it becomes rotten, swells up with internal gases, and bursts violently out of its protective outer skin?
It is completely ruined. It spoils entirely. It has broken out of the very biological mechanism designed to keep it safe, moist, and healthy. And now it is just going to decay rapidly in the open air and be eaten by pests.
That visceral visual is the literal physical root of the word fisk. In ancient Arabic, it originally describes a date breaking, corrupting, and bursting out of its shell. When the Qur'an borrows this incredibly vivid agricultural term and applies it to human psychology and morality, it is describing a state of deliberate, violent rebellion.
So it's not accidental.
Not at all. It is the act of tearing oneself away from the natural moral order, the fitra, that the Creator designed specifically to protect the human soul from decaying.
So it is not an accidental slip-up. It is a structural rupture.
Precisely. The people who were misled by the mosquito parable did not just casually make a minor intellectual mistake. They were already fascicant. They were already deeply corrupted from within. Their minds were so calcified by bad habits, unethical life choices, and blind, stubborn adherence to broken societal norms that they were fundamentally primed to fail the test before the mosquito was even mentioned.
So the pressure had been building up inside them for a long time.
Yes. When they were finally faced with a moment that required a free, humble, and open mind, their internal distortion was so severe that they literally perceived profound truth as a laughable falsehood. The date had already burst. The parable merely revealed the rot.
Wow. So they burst out of their own protective moral skin. And I imagine once you are existing outside of that natural order, once your fitra is ruptured, everything you see is entirely distorted. It is like trying to view the world through a cracked funhouse mirror. You think the profound truth is ugly, and you think the superficial ugly things are beautiful. You think a massive dead concrete building is a miracle of existence, and a living, breathing, hyper-complex mosquito is just a stupid joke. Your entire internal calibration is completely backwards.
They have entirely lost the capacity to recognize reality because they have systematically destroyed the internal mechanism designed to perceive it. They're locked in a prison of their own making.
This is all incredibly deep, and the linguistic history is fascinating, but I want to make sure we do not just leave this as an abstract historical theological discussion. How do we apply this directly to our modern lives right now? We are not sitting in a desert 1400 years ago watching dates grow. We are navigating a hyper-connected world of smartphones, artificial intelligence, 24-hour news cycles, and corporate ladders. What does the parable of the mosquito mean for us today in this environment?
Let me frame it with a question regarding how we interact with the revelation today. Are we treating the revelation like a fragile, ancient museum artifact that we only look at respectfully from behind thick glass? Or are we treating it like a highly advanced, razor-sharp surgical scalpel meant to actively operate on our minds today?
I think, unfortunately, a vast majority of people treat it like an artifact. It is something you respect. Maybe you display it beautifully on a high shelf. Maybe you dust it off on special holidays. But you absolutely do not let it cut into your daily life. You don't let it challenge your modern assumptions about how to live or what to value.
And that is the exact danger we face. Treating it as an artifact neutralizes its power. This entire parable of the mosquito is a massive ongoing project to violently liberate the human intellect. We must actively revolt against blind tradition. We have to stop treating the Qur'an merely as a book for vocal blessings or something we only rhythmically recite at funerals to comfort the grieving.
Which is how it is so often used, just background noise for cultural milestones.
Exactly. Relegating the revelation to just a set of passive background rituals is actually a modern manifestation of fisk. By doing so, we are literally deviating the revelation from its explosive, transformative, intended purpose.
Wow, that's a strong way to put it.
It is the reality. The revelation is a living, active force meant to relentlessly smash our modern intellectual idols, whether that idol is our career status, our bank account, or our social media clout. Think about the mocking question from the verse that the arrogant ask. What did God intend by this? We must take that exact question and completely transform it. We must take it from a sneering, arrogant dismissal and forge it into our deepest, most sincere research mandate.
How do we do that practically?
When we look at the natural world, or when we read a challenging, disruptive verse, our modern minds should be asking with intense curiosity, what is the divine intent here? What is the hidden architecture of this concept? How does this redefine my broken understanding of success, power, and reality?
I love that so much. Taking the weapon of the arrogant, their mocking question, and turning it into the ultimate tool of the believer, what did God intend,
Hmm.
becomes the foundation of all scientific and spiritual inquiry. It means we cannot just coast through life accepting the normal way of doing things. We have to constantly, aggressively interrogate our reality.
We absolutely do.
We have to ask ourselves, why do I value what I value? Am I spending my one precious life chasing giant dead skyscrapers in my career, trying to impress people who don't care about me? Or am I looking for the profound living truth hidden in the quiet small moments of my life?
It demands total, uncompromising self-awareness.
Yeah.
It forces you to constantly check your own metrics against the infallible divine standard. You can no longer hide behind what society deems successful.
So as we wrap up this incredibly expansive conversation, what is the ultimate final takeaway regarding how the revelation trains us? If a listener walks away with one core principle from the mosquito, what is the final lesson?
It comes down to the concept of measurement. How can we ever hope to accurately weigh the vast universe, to understand the complexities of galaxies, quantum fields, or human morality, if we do not first know exactly how much our own ego weighs and how heavily that ego biases our scales?
That is profound. If your scale is broken, or if you have a heavy thumb of pride pressing down on it, every single measurement you take of the outside world is going to be wrong. You have to calibrate the instrument, your own mind, before you can measure anything else.
Exactly. And the entire history of human progress proves this. The absolute greatest scientific and intellectual discoveries in history often came from pondering the utterly trivial, the things other people ignored. The concept of gravity was conceptualized from an apple falling from a branch, an everyday mundane occurrence.
Right.
The steam power that revolutionized the entire globe came from watching a simple kettle of water boil. The true believer is in a state of constant, intense attentiveness to the small things. To them, the verse of the mosquito acts as a highly sensitive, perfectly calibrated scale to weigh ourselves.
A scale for the soul.
Yes. It asks us point blank, are we truly open to the truth, regardless of how unimpressive, irritating, or socially unacceptable its packaging might be? Returning to the pure revelation and violently stripping away the deafening noise of inherited human opinions and societal pressures is the only known cure for our cognitive fisc. It is the only way to tear down our broken mental infrastructure and rebuild our consciousness on a foundation of absolute truth.
Thank you so much for walking us through that incredibly profound perspective. It really is a complete paradigm shift that changes how you look at the physical world and your own internal world. To summarize what we have unpacked in this episode, the revelation does not just inform us. Its goal is to actively demolish and rebuild our minds from the ground up. True greatness is never found in massive superficial displays of human ego, but in the infinite, staggering complexity of the smallest divine creations. And ultimately, our reaction to the seemingly trivial, like a tiny mosquito, acts as a flawless mirror, exposing whether our minds are grounded in humble truth or completely blinded by our own fragile arrogance. So I want to leave you, the listener, with this final open-ended thought to ponder. If the ultimate absolute truth of the universe can be hidden within the microscopic, fragile wings of a mosquito, what profound, life-changing lessons are you aggressively swatting away in your own life right now, simply because they do not look important enough to demand your attention? That's it for this episode of Insights. If you found this reflection helpful, follow the show and join us next time as we continue verse by verse in the Qur'an. Until then, take one idea from this verse into your day.